one of the basic teachings that Baha'u'llah brings is that this oneness of humanity, the oneness of people. And so now the earth is kind of like, I often said, taking in all these refugees from Syria now and from the countries, many of the countries that are poor countries are trying to immigrate in to the areas where there's work, either into the cities, or one of the last boatloads that have gone down have been from Africa and the poor countries trying to get where there's more life and more opportunity, and so it's now like the whole world is mixed up, and as we reduce the prejudice against other religions and other so-called races. There's only one human race, but we call it the black race. But it's a misnomer. You know that from school, that there's only one human race, and that actually they've been interbreeding for a long time, but because America is the one nation that has come the closest to living the dream for man to have a place under the sun, to have a work, to have a family, to have a livelihood, and it is the only nation in the world who fought a battle to free the slaves. Because we've had slavery down through all time. And it was the Portuguese that 500 years ago, when they found out the world was round, and they got in their little boats and went all around the world, and they're the ones that went into Africa and stole people and sold them as slaves in another land. But America and some other little nations, although the European nations have a long history of fighting each other, having wars. And according to Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, that's finished. And we're the ones that have to slowly move into a world and live in a practical world with other people, solving world problems, which actually we're doing not very well, but we live in one world. It's an interacting world, and it's all hooked up. If not through internet, through Twitter, or all these protests that are a sign of change. So I think you should ask the questions that you have about the Baha'i faith. It does not negate or put down any religion, especially the big religions, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Buddhists. We see them as a series of teachers that have come along until man has become mature, and we're living in an age of maturity, and we'll see the maturity when we do have a world that can live together and solve problems. So Baha'u'llah gave us the whole outline, and one of them is not only there's one God serving all. His teachers have been the Zoroaster and Moses and Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad. And Baha'u'llah says he is a spokesperson for this age, and it's for the uniting of the earth. We don't know what the future will be. There'll be another teacher in 1,000 years or so. I don't know whether it's going to be interplanetary or what, but the challenge right now that we're all living in is how to bring unity to the planet. Because war is so horrible when you think about it. That Homo sapiens, these people, are killing each other, and it's become so outrageous because of the splitting of the atom and because of the terrible weaponry that we have now. It's scary, it's very, in this time of change, it's kind of scary to survive even, to find your way on this planet. But he says we're all one family and we have to meet together with love and respect for other human beings. There's only one God, one people, and one home. And then there's a job that we all have, and that is how to make it a home for all people and to live in peace. And that's why some of these things are so nice, because they're the kind of love that kind of brings awareness to the things you do every day, and to do it peacefully and not always fighting with yourself plus other people, because, you know, it's not easy to earn a living and find your way and live in this time. So I think you should bring up your questions on, I think people agree we need to have a peaceful world, but people are very skeptical. And so I think you should ask the questions that you feel would be a hindrance or a help to building a new world order. Do you think it can be done? You're a very practical, educated man. And you're practicing these things, which means we're respecting one another, and we're living together, and we're not fighting always with ourselves. We fight with ourselves. So do you think it will be done?
As we've talked before, I think it really has to start within oneself. If you don't find that peace and you're not able to move beyond that, it would be impossible to go beyond. I think for many people, find sort of an inner peace is something it would be nice when we're coming into this world that someone would suggest that would be part of our daily practice. But unfortunately, it usually isn't. And it takes many years to find that might be something that would help us in our lives. I think there is a point, education and work is important, but finding the inner peace is probably something that would help move things beyond even anything that could be materially created. So if you ask a big question, I think it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of people taking the time to become peace with themselves, and then we may find that we have a peaceful world. But until we reach that point, I don't think it's kind of like the old saying, leading a horse to water. You lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily make the horse drink. And I think that's also with finding peace within oneself. You can promote peace, and you can try to do it on a from a county, state, national, international level. But if the peace hasn't been, the foundation hasn't been set from within oneself, they're just words. And
Well,
so it's a process that really takes a sort of a, I don't know if you would call it a re-education, but at least an awareness process that really would be helpful to start with children at a very young age, so they see the importance. It is possible to teach, an old dog new tricks, as we all know, because many of us came into a certain awareness later on in our lives. But to actually give that as much energy and emphasis as education, work, making money, that type of thing, it's really, I think, going to take a process that is it's much more difficult, even with all our modes of communication. I think it has been great to have the internet and all of the things that bring us to at least able to communicate. But at the same time, without some sort of inner direction, there becomes maybe a lot of distractions, and the distractions keep you from, ultimately reaching that peace. So it's going to be a long process. I mean, I think we have many tools in place that would be helpful.
But are you telling me that some people have a long way to go to practice these?
It's just not very important to many people.
To them.
It's just, there are other things that are much more important, television.
That's
being
more
able
important.
It doesn't, I guess what I'm saying is there are so many distractions in our world. So many distractions. Mm-hmm. Some practical, making money, having a job, keeping food on the table. But, turn on the TV. I mean, I cannot, just even that, if we could get everyone to turn their televisions off, that might be the start. I've always thought from the other perspective, the way you can actually conquer a country without even having to drop one bomb is to drop televisions and give them the television station that they're supposed to watch. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon they will do whatever you've asked them to do. So in other words, I think the communications have a real value, but when misused, they can be a distraction that can lead people to more confusion and more division. I mean, just take a look, for instance, just at a very simple thing in the United States, politics, and a two-party system, and the television. How can you possibly find any peace?
What you're telling me is that it's all well and good. It sounds good, but the people are too distracted. They're too busy with other things. But maybe they haven't been given the challenge. There's a lot of learning going on in, say, for instance, social justice. All of a sudden, we're going to have social justice till we carry it too far sometimes. Where did that come from? Where do they stand up for, in the case of social justice with the black and the white, racial, but social justice with economics? Well, what you're saying is that the world's too distracted, it's too materialistic, it's too busy, it's too distract is a really good word, but maybe they don't know. Social justice is just one of the movements that are out there. Because now you can complain to your government when something doesn't suit you or you don't like it. We have a means. It's no sign that you may get what you want in this time, but the process is there. And Baha'u'llah laid this down. There is a pattern. I gave you the little pamphlet on the pattern for future society. And we've moved into that, except people haven't changed their hearts. The goodwill for all people is not there. The prejudice is still there. The survival of the fittest is still very strong, very rampant, and in a way, you have to struggle to survive in this world. But you also have a spiritual struggle, and that's to rest with this. Is this possible? Can people, a small band of people, change? Can they create a unity on the ground level that can change the world? And people have to come to it like you're here to inquire, to find out if this is a possibility, that we can all live together like brothers and sisters. And in this faith, it's not just like Christianity where someone offends you and you turn the other cheek, you forgive them. We do that, but we also have a world order. We have a way of communicating and planning together called consultation, and it's an evolving concept because the big business practices and other people are looking at this, and they've looked at group dynamics and so on, but it's a way of this assembly, the 9 people that we elect to represent this community, meet together, and there's no class system. It can be a poor housewife and a very educated person, but the consultation, which is the method of putting forth your idea and letting it go. People can't do that. It's very hard. If you have an idea, I've got to do it this way, and I had all this trouble, and this happened, and this happened, and I don't believe it won't work. You put your idea forward and then forget it. Don't hang on to it, because something better will usually come out of the consultation. Now, this is very difficult to practice. If we didn't have a faith and we didn't say a prayer to kind of unify our hearts, we couldn't make it work. But it's to put forth your ideas, not revenge, not anger, not controlling, to put forth what you feel might work for the community. We discuss how to set up children's classes. We discuss how to get this message to the public. We discuss how to write a pamphlet that explains it. Different things that come up, but from this very attitude that everyone has a say and everyone has a thing, out of these conflicting kind of ideas will come unifying kind of concept. It's a problem solving, and it's very hard to practice because Americans like to believe what they believe, and they don't always want to consider even practical changes to that. It's just something in our culture. And so it's a kind of training that Baha'is get. We make a lot of mistakes, but if you make it in unity, you can correct the mistake. That's the whole point of it. And if somebody still has terrible reservations after they put forth their idea, if the majority feel this is a good thing, it's very important to go with the unity of the group, because if there is a mistake, it'll be seen immediately and you can change it. That's just being practical on the level of existing. And if you didn't have the spirit that Christ brought, think what the world was like when Christ came. It was a very advanced civilization. They had the Roman Empire. They had wonderful but they didn't educate the slaves, but they had slaves, but they had baths where they went and had lectures and talked, and they had these big 200,000 arenas where they came, just like we're doing now with football and everything else, where people were going. And they had languages, and they had the baths, which are also places where they went. They'd be a whole big block, and there were lectures and discussions, and they could travel at the time when Christianity was being persecuted. But the small, tiny little groups of Christians were there. They kept on, even though they were living under very difficult times, because some of the leaders said they were okay. The rest kind of let them be persecuted, and some gave up their lives. But they formed these small units, and the civilization was great. The gladiators were coming into the arena, or they were fighting each other, or they would take a slave and pit it against a hungry animal, and thousands of people were watching. You know, it sounds like today, doesn't it? It sounds like today. And then all of a sudden, this little handful of people who changed the whole of Christianity was growing up from underneath. And that's the way the Baha'i faith is growing at grassroots level, and operating through an election system that we have every year. We have to meet together and be practical about what means we have, what we can do, what can be translated, how can we establish centers in other places. So it all sounds good, but you have your reservations about the nature of man. Can't people turn their lives in another direction and be involved in doing like the monks do, to try and give you some kind of peace of mind, some kind of peace of soul? So you're saying that it's hard to change people. People are distracted.
It is a process that one must get to a point. Children may be different. Children may be given the opportunity, I think, to be introduced to it in early age, and then it isn't something that would have to be a natural process. It would become as natural as going out and getting some exercise, or doing some artwork, or whatever it might be. In other words, the inner peace that could be pursued in daily life, if it is introduced to a young child, could become a part and be built up as a foundation so that it could carry on. And that is really the start. I think the more difficult task comes from as people get older, more educated, more set in their ways, more definitive, set in a religion, set in a type of work, set in just a pattern of life. I think at that point it's a very different, something usually occurs in one's life where they want something a little more than what they have. They're looking for something beyond what money can buy, what material things can do. Unfortunately, I think our world has been so structured in the material form. At least let's talk about the U.S., but also Europe and even the rest of the world. The way it's moving is to move out of that and to say that you maybe could set aside some time to find the inner peace, to go that route. In other words, it's changing a pattern. It may benefit them, just like changing a diet slightly or whatever else. But when you get set in your ways, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get to that point, in other words, where maybe you reached when you were in your 20s, where I reached when I was in my 20s, and so on. There was something about you that wanted to go a little bit further with it. There had to be something a little bit more, something, and it became a big part and an integrated part of your life. I'm just saying, for many people, it is so foreign. It is almost as if this is, at first the first question is what religion is this?
Yes, but what are the Christians, what are the ministers saying in the churches? They're on TV, they're all in the churches. What are they saying to their people? Besides, the only way to be saved is through Christ.
Well,
and Muslims the same way, see, and that's one of the, anybody can be so-called saved, but you're saying if we start with children, of course it's better if we start with children, but some of us are just grown-up children anyway.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And you can change any bad habit that you want to change. And Baha'u'llah, and Abdul Baha, his son, who we have the pictures of, he came to America in 1912, and in those days when he walked around with his long robe and the fez on his head, and he had his several people with him that interpreted for him. They thought this was very strange, and he just went everywhere. He went to the synagogues, and he had some kind of, had an innate power, of course, and some connection with the spirit, but he was the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith, which we feel is the great teacher for the unification of the planet. But when he talked in the synagogues and the universities, he was at Stanford and all these places, he was wonderful. He gave the message. And often, when he went to the synagogue, he talked to those people, and they were not offended about Muslims and Christians, trying to explain what the Baha'is see. Those have just been the teachers down through the age. And then human beings change. They change the church, they change the way they worship, they make war on each other, and they narrow And this whole Baha'i viewpoint is it lightens your viewpoint. It gives you the world. And so what you're saying is pretty hard for adults to change, but they can, and they do all the time. And sometimes when you watch the public figures, for instance, the present, we don't talk politics because they're divisive, they divide, but the present President of the United States changes his viewpoint as things change in the world, and that's the way we have to be. I mean, he's a politician, of course, but to be able to adapt to changing times. And the time, what we need now is unity. Unity of purpose. And that's why you have to look at the Baha'i faith as whatever is a God-given plan that has been evolving. The people were very primitive in the early days, with even 1,000 years ago, or 2,500 years ago. But most of these religions all have the 10 Commandments in one form or another. That comes from God through his spokespersons. Those are Jesus and Moses and Buddha, have been the ones that have brought the message of God for that period, for that time. And now it's united, and the challenge is to live together on the planet, recognizing the beauty of another person. This is a soul. You have a soul. You come from God, you return to God. It's what all the teachers have taught. And while you're living here on earth, you got a lot to learn. And the learning never stops. But there's a pattern. And that's the pattern that Baha'u'llah has given for how to live. And he says that religion and science have to agree. They have to, you don't try and do away with science or to try to separate out what some of the religions are now that would like to do away with it. We live on this planet. We have to take care of this planet. And we're challenged to take, not only now, we're going through a pretty scary time when we have science that has able to interpret to us the offenses that we have made on the earth. We haven't treated the earth very well. It's a common home. And now we have climate change. And through science and the right attitude, because those people that don't want to give up the work that is causing carbon, I'm just giving a poor example because you can find it in all things, because Baha'u'llah says, the earth is a common home. Take care of the earth and respect each other and acknowledge that there's some great life force. This great life force, we call it God, that holds this whole universe together. And we have to learn how not only to take care of this earth now, but we have to learn how to live together on this earth. And so we're sort of forced now to take care of these refugees. And I get real upset because the Muslims are fighting each other. And what kind of religion is that? When they're fighting each other, the Sunnis and the Shias and whatever they are. And I'm horrified by the war. And that's what Abdu'l-Baha said when he came to America. Or when he wrote and he lectured and he held the Baha'i communities together, though they were attacked, and Baha'u'llah was, his whole life he was persecuted and attacked and imprisoned. He was in prison for 40 years with his father. When the Young Turks overthrew the government, he was released, and that's when he went out to Egypt and then came to Europe, and then he came to America when he was an old man. That the message is to the kings and to the rulers, Allah wrote to them and said, come out of your castles, come out of your churches, and take care of your people. There's only one people. That's a really hard one for people to recognize in this day and age with all of our education and science. We're one people. And the minute you put them together, they interbreed. So it's a kind of making the effort to eliminate prejudice, take down the barriers that separate people, and lift people up to a level of understanding the oneness of the earth, the oneness of the human beings, oneness of God. We call it the three onennesses. And the things you bring up are the skepticism or the barriers, or you might call them challenges. So how do we live together? Because people are cooperating every day, or we wouldn't exist. I mean, they're cooperating. We're out on the road in our cars, and we're living in our houses in relatively peace. And where they don't have peace, they're asking now, the countries that don't have good security are asking for security. And women are asking for their rights to work along with men in establishing this one world. It's one world. And it's kind of interesting because Baha'is operate in one world. We have this oneness together. We have this, we can go anywhere. And usually there are small, some big Baha'i communities in Persia where the faith is still persecuted. And they have been caused a large martyrdom in the early days of the faith. But you can go and travel around the world and find little communities of Baha'is now. And it's kind of growing up from underneath. And that's why we try and give this encouragement to people. First, you have to recognize there's one God and one people. And then you have to know what's your contribution. What do you have to do with your life? I mean, are you an artist or a farmer or a businessman, whatever it is? You do the work to the best of your ability, and you work for the unity and the oneness of the human family. It's not easy. See how skeptical you are, and you say,
well, yeah, I was trying to answer a question.
But you're saying how nice it is for children to be trained, And I think by and large, a lot of people that don't want to go to the churches like to send their kids to Sunday school. We've had a lot of people that have put their children into Baha'i children's classes, although they don't want to change their lives. They don't, they're intermarriage with Jewish and something else and so on. But adults can change. We all change. Many people, you're adults, you have to investigate for yourself and find out for yourself. But I think the Baha'i faith is exciting because we're looking at one world, and an ideal world, and we're working for that world. And in this day and age, Baha'u'llah has given us the method to do this, how we can take care of the business of the community, and how do we handle, here they've got to figure out how to keep this center running, and make plans for teaching. How do we find the people of goodwill, or the people that are seeking, or the people that are discontent with what's going on in the world. We all like to know who we are and what our job is. It has nothing to do with age. We've had some very old people come into this faith. And I was raised in the church, a Methodist church, but when my sister found the Baha'i faith, just as I was coming out of this kind of special community, and solved the problem of the black people. Prejudice was terrible in those days. And somebody said, what did you do? Well, I was out of the country when they were having the 60s, when they were having the marches with the black. But we were in the Baha'i community when the youth, I became a youth, and we were in the community, and there was one black person in our group. And we go into Walgreens and sat around the edge to get a Coca-Cola or ice cream. They wouldn't serve us. They wouldn't serve us because there was one black person. And one time we're walking on the street, and the police stopped us and said, I'm going to put you all in jail. He didn't do it, but that was pretty scary because one black person was white. But there was another family, but that boy was this. And we had a nice youth group, but that was a scary time in America. We've evolved, we've changed. And you've seen changes in your lifetime since you've been a Baha'i. Think about the changes. And you're asking the questions. You're in the questioning period. Is it possible? Is there a way to live peaceably? Is there a possible? It's not just a utopia, because I've seen so much change in the time since I became a Baha'i that's coming about, and everybody said, oh, you can't do that, it's not possible. You can't reunite your religions. It's pretty hard to reunite some of the religions that already have got their own interpretation of exclusiveness, or you can only get saved through their church. That's all. That's nonsense. You save yourself. And so for Baha'is, we're practicing this new world order. And we're trying. We make all kinds of mistakes, and we're very human and so on. But it's a wonderful pattern to look at. Are uniting the world, and because it's practical. We don't have any priests or clergy. It's just Sherry and I, whoever we are that believe this, that share it with people. And often we used to publicize things, but we don't do so much of that anymore. Occasionally we have some occasion, but we're trying to live in the community level and trying to, in a way, kind of spiritualize the communities we live in, because it's uniting. It's a uniting of the community. It's uniting of the people, and you can't become a Baha'i unless you really study it and understand what it is. But it doesn't matter how old you are or how prejudiced. We've had some really wild people that eventually became Baha'is, fighting it and arguing against it and believing that humankind is, that you can't change humankind. And that's kind of silly, because we see changes all the time. We see changes in our life. We see changes around us. It's a change in cycles of life, the cycles of the earth, and so on. So our job is now to unite, and we do it in small communities around the world, and try and promote unity. And you can't become a Baha'i until you really investigate, think about it, what it is this a possibility? And we do a lot of prayer and meditation to try and think on these things. So it's overcoming with knowledge. You can't become a blind believer. You have to read and you have to think for yourself. Pretty hard to do, because people don't like to think for themselves. They like to be guided and told. Or this is the way we've always done politics, so we can't change it. And I think it's pretty obvious we need some changes with our politics. But we're in the middle of change. Think, Art, how much you've seen in your lifetime. Didn't you grow up on the mainland?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Hawaii in some ways is a very interesting place to live, because there's a kind of aloha here that's, some of the Hawaiians are kind of angry now. They feel they're being kind of left out, but there's something about the Polynesian kind of attitude about one family. They just have absorbed other people that have come in, you know, wonderful ocean navigators, and they kind of look at the world, and they think the ocean unites them. The rest of us think the ocean separates us. Mm-hmm. That's Western thinking. We're separated islands. But their ideas, that's a kind of whole Polynesian, and it's a kind of universal idea that we're all united. We can go and live anywhere on the earth and be with those people, if you can overcome whatever prejudices exist. But in your lifetime, that has changed.
So,
You know, I told you my experience with black people. Now, you don't even dare use a word, the N-word. That's just part of the change that's going along. And I have this nephew-in-law who's working with the NAACP to change the language. Because we're very crude on TV. We're very crude in some of the politics at the moment are so disunifying for people. They're so put down on people. They're separating. They're trying to do the survival of the fittest, and they're according to them at the top. When exactly the other thing is going on in the earth, it's just that the Baha'is have the word from God that now it's time to unify the planet and to live together on the planet and to take care of our common home. That's what's fun in these subdivisions is people that are trying to go back to the land and live as they can from the land and do as much as they can, and to kind of look at how other people have evolved and the foods that they eat and the things that they do, and it's very interesting. And we exchange with each other, we learn from each other. So there's a lot of really wonderful, exciting things going on. And Baha'i is just a way of putting your shoulder to the wheel to help bring change and fellowship and unity in diversity to the planet. So my argument with you is, or my reply is, people can change at any time. They have to want to change.
and they don't want to. There's a lot of people who don't want to. Or I've met a lot of people who don't want to.
Yes, but sometimes you already have some of these unifying things going for you. You're open. You're a good neighbor. You don't have heavy prejudices against only the bad people. They get on your nerves, right?
Yeah, right, yeah. Far from perfect, that's for sure, yeah.
But you live in orchid land.
Oh,
You live on the land. And I think living on the land is a lot of work. With the sun and the rain every day, I get all these invasive species that grow faster than the good things. You've got to know a little bit about.
That's part of change, I sort of accept them.
So there are a lot of good people, but to band together, to unify and help each other, it helps you grow yourself. You grow yourself, you learn by doing. But there are a lot of good people, like yourself. You've worked, you've had a life, and now you have to look at your life because they keep you alive forever. I mean, we'd have long life, despite the spiraling drug costs and so on. So what do you do with that part of your life? Retirement has changed. Yes, it's 10 o'clock.
You need to get going.
Did you read from that book?
I did, and that was what I brought today. I think I'm the type of person that likes to simplify, so I can get, you know, a good feel or foundation of what you were sharing. And I found this in the little book. I still have it. I'll bring it to you next week if we meet again. It was the principles, the list of the basic principles of the Baha'i faith. And there's no number differentiation here, but I'll just read down the list. The oneness of mankind, the oneness of religion, an unfettered search after truth, the abandonment of prejudice and superstition, universal compulsory education, equality of men and women, adoption of an international auxiliary language, the harmony of religion and science, economic principles, work for all, abolition of extremes of poverty and wealth, a world legislature, a world tribunal, and universal peace.
That's the practical side of it.
That, you know, that is in our discussion. Again, I think we have begun a discussion and an understanding process between you and I. And this is the continuation of it. You had the book from Thich Nhat Hanh with the foreword from the Dalai Lama on world peace. And
Yes.
so what we're trying to do, I believe, in our discussion is looking at similarities of other practices and that all basically, as I see it, the truth is all one truth. There are many teachers, some well recognized, some not so recognized. But the point being is, one that came up, for instance, and it has come up a number of times in our discussion today, was the harmony of religion and science. I had mentioned to you last week when I was here that I have also spent some time looking into Ayurveda, the 5,000-year-old Indian medical system, Ayurveda, which encompasses basically oneness. And again, 5,000-year-old medical system. This is, there was just a short passage in here that I wanted to read to you talking about how religion and science, as viewed through Ayurveda, the 5,000-year-old medical system, is looked at. And this is a quote. This is from Baha'i. It says, like other great civilizations, India never separated science from philosophy and religion. Rather, it viewed all knowledge as a part of a whole designed to promote human happiness, health, and growth. Philosophy is the love of truth. Science is the discovery of truth through experiment. And religion is the experience of truth and application of it in daily living. Ayurveda is a science of life. It is both systematized knowledge and practical wisdom, an art of healthy living that encompasses all phases of life, body, mind, and spirit.
Now that's what's available today, is the practice of medicine, what we call practice of medicine, the healing arts, are all contributing now to the new concept about the human body and so on. This kind of, we have practitioners in the community that practice these kind of, have you known any of them?
In this community, not so far. On the mainland, yes. Baha'i, as I mentioned last time we talked, is an Ayurvedic physician who immigrated to the U.S. in the mid-'80s and started an Ayurvedic institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and has been training Ayurvedic clinicians here in the U.S. since then. To become an Ayurvedic physician, you must go through all the training.
I'm talking about that science and how it's kind of been put together with other healing arts. But
Aspects are
but
being
it's not the
integrated.
same, it's not the Western viewpoint about educate, but Baha'u'llah does deal, Abdul Baha does deal with healing arts. He talks about the human body, but that's interesting because their way of looking at the sections of the body is quite different.
Yes, and I think the key element, I think, if we go back to our original discussion on an introduction into people bringing inner peace into their own lives and the study of the spiritual study and so forth, it is something that has been sort of out of the Western medical aspect. In other words, they'll look at body. That was their primary focus. Now they went from body to body-mind, saying the mind does have some aspect. And the last aspect of that will be spirit, the spiritual aspect of it. I think we're still in our infancy in the West to bring in the spiritual element.
Yeah.
And I think that's also the element that we're talking about, even in religions. The true spiritual aspect of religion, so to speak, has been displaced. In other words, the religion has become the dominant feature. The religion, like we discussed last time, religions, especially if we want to look sort of from the development of Christianity on and look how they've been integrated into not just religion, but economics, politics, and everything is pushed in together. And even though in this country they say, no, there is a separation of church and state, you understand through the beginning of Christianity, from the time it has been rewritten and integrated to become religion, economics, and politics are all one. And this is what the divisions that we've talked about before among religions, even among Christianity and religions within Christianity, and the breakoffs and the breakoffs and breakoffs. If you look at the heart of it, it seems to always go back to